Thank you, Christopher. I'm a patient of Eagle Physicians. I know there's a number of you here that are connected. It's a large multi-specialty group in Greensboro, so they've got family and internal medicine, all sorts of different specialty groups. And so I've been with them really since we have moved to Greensboro. Back earlier than this, but a year ago this past January, I finally relented and did what my primary care doctor said, and that was to participate in what they call Eagle Wellness. Now, I call Eagle Wellness Fat Camp. And so what it is that you meet with a board-certified medical doctor that's doubly certified in, so not just a medical doctor, but also nutrition. And so the goal is to help you get overall better health. And I don't know what, I looked like a busted can of biscuits, but I don't know, but like with butter. So it was good looking. Anyway, but I knew that I needed to do something, and so I started going. Anyway, I am so grateful for that experience, and I continue to go. I think I'm down roughly 40 pounds since when I started, and so that's really good. And so, yes, thank you for that. And so, nonsense. Let me tighten this. Anyway. But one of the things that I'm so grateful about that experience, and I think honestly, this is one of the reasons why it is successful, or has been successful me, it is the sheer act of accountability, because at least on a monthly basis, I have to go, and it's not just meeting with a doctor that provides accountability, it's meeting with his scale. And when I go and meet with that scale, I have an unpleasant relationship with it, because that scale there it's mean. And it calls you names, it laughs at you, and it tells you things that clearly are not true, but still, you got to step on this scale. But I'm telling you, when I am going to that scale, I look like I am getting ready to go to prison, because my shoes, my socks are off, my belt is off, I wear an undershirt, the top shirt is off, I've got my watch off, my ring is off, my glasses are off, my keys are out, my pocket knife is gone. I'm like pulling buttons off of my pants. And it's not always the same nurse that's helping. Sometimes it's a new one that might be filling in, and she's like, yeah, you're getting everything off, aren't you? And I said, listen, I'm gonna get credit for everything. I'm gonna get credit for everything. And I said, it's amazing how much some of this stuff will weigh you down. Just like your watch or your wallet, it's amazing how much sometimes that can weigh you down, how much more extra weight it presents. That's not just true when it comes to going to the doctor's office and standing on the scale. It's also true in life that there are things many times that we are carrying around that we don't realize the extent of, or the scope of the weight that it represents on us and in us. That's what we're thinking about as part of a series that I'm calling Summer Baggage. And we're thinking about some of the weights that unnecessarily add to our experience, not just as people, but particularly as followers of Christ. Last week, we talked about the weight of grief and how that can weigh us down, and how it is not just as a person, but as a follower of Christ, I can operate with that and go through that experience. Today, we want to think about something else, though, that weighs us down, and that is literally the stuff of life. It's money, it's things. More broadly defined, it's materialism. How is it that materialism could possibly weigh me or be weighing you down? We see the answer to that question today in the 13th chapter of Hebrews. If you would look with me there, Hebrews chapter 13, starting with verse 5, just 2 verses. Hebrews 13, verse 5 says, "Keep your life free from the love of money. Be satisfied with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you or abandon you. Therefore, we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me?" In just these couple of verses, God uses the writer of Hebrews to help answer that question for us. But about what is it about materialism, about money, about wealth, about material possessions, how is it that that stuff can weigh us down? And based on these couple of verses, there's a couple of ways. And the first is this: it promotes dissatisfaction. Materialism weighs us down because it promotes dissatisfaction. Now, you say, well, I don't know if I quite see that, but one of the things that you got to pay attention to that is going on in this book particularly is the context. It's written not just to Hebrews, which is another word for Jewish, but specifically these are Jewish believers. So those who have come out of formal Judaism, traditional Judaism, and they become followers of Jesus. Now, because of that, that has put them on a double negative list. By that, I mean that by following Christ, the Romans don't like them because they don't like Christians. But beyond that, their own communities, in many cases, their own families are rejecting them because they're viewed to be spurning the law of Moses and to rejecting everything that the prophets and everything that we know is the Old Testament. It's like they're thumbing their nose at that. Consequently, many of these Jewish believers, those that have come out of Judaism and are following Jesus, economically, they're in pretty sad shape. Some of them have been fired. They've lost their jobs because of this. Their boss says, I don't want any part of you're a religious traitor. I want nothing to do with you. Others, if you're a farmer, they won't buy your crops because they don't want to trade with you. They don't want to do anything to help you. Won't speak to you in the market, won't speak to you in the streets, completely abandoned and ostracized. Things are very, very, very difficult. And so as you get to the end of this book, where he's encouraging these who are going through real difficulty and are tempted to abandon and to walk away from the faith, to walk away from Jesus, the encouragement is to keep pressing on. And, as you get to the end of this letter, it seems like he is sharing a number of what seem to be incongruous thoughts, where he's talking about one topic and then another. So, for example, he says in verse 3 about remember those in prison. So he's talking about remembering other particular believers who might have been thrown in jail. He says in verse 4, talking about marriage it's to be honored by all and encouraging marital sexual fidelity. And then he starts talking about the love of money. And in short, it seems as though these thoughts have nothing to do with each other. He's kind of landing the plane. And it is the case that he's landing the plane of this and just reminding these believers, this is the standard to which God has called us to, not just as people, but specifically as his followers, as followers of Jesus. And as God wants these other things for us, this is something he also wants. He wants for me, he wants for you as his follower to keep your life, my life, our lives free from the love of money. Now, again, these are people that many of whom, they don't have any money. Maybe some of them used to, perhaps others have had businesses and they've lost those businesses, or they had farms and they've lost those farms. Some of them have lost freedom and consequently lost jobs and employment and financial security and all that stuff. Many of them might have had property that they had deeds to, but now they have lost all of that. And he's saying to these people, I want you to make sure that you do what? That you keep your life free from the love of money. It is easy for us, after all, I think, to say that materialism is the temptation and is the struggle of those who have a lot of material. That materialism is a greater temptation for those who have a lot of money or who have a lot of property, who have big investments, who have fat 401k accounts. That it's easy for those who have a lot to be tempted by that. But the reality is you and I can be ensnared by materialism whether we have a massive fortune or whether we have almost nothing, wondering where our next meal is going to come from. Whether we have much or little, we can have a feeling for and an affection for money and for material things that God does not want us to have. Now, in hearing that, you say, well, honestly, what difference really does it make? All right, so what if I really want to make a lot of money? So what if I really want to have another home or a vacation home? So what if I want to have nicer things? What difference really does it make? It's effectively inconsequential. And in truth, in American culture, don't we celebrate that after all? And so it's easy to say, well, it's not that big of a deal. And what I want us to regularly remind ourselves of is this fact. When God tells us not to do something or to avoid something, he's saying that sincerely for our good. And so when God cautions us against the love of money, when he cautions us and warns us not to have an inappropriate affection for the things and the stuff of life, he's saying that for our good. And the context and the verse continues by, I really think, communicating why that's the case. Because he says, keep your life free from the love of money, then there's a period, and then there's a statement, be satisfied with what you have. That sounds kind of strange, that he's saying, don't love money, don't have this unkept affection for things and the stuff of life, and then by contrast, be satisfied. That contrastive thought suggests that these two things cannot be going on at the same time. You cannot have a love for stuff and accumulating more and at the same time experience satisfaction. You can do one or you can do the other. You can be satisfied or you can want more. You can be content, or you can say, I've got to have a little bit more. I've got to have this. I've got to have that. Early on, just a moment ago, I described the experience of going to what I call fat camp, and the doctor said something to me that has really, really stuck with me. And to the extent possible, I've tried to practice this, but it hasn't been entirely successful, but I have tried to pay attention to it. And he said this: one of the challenges for us is that we have grown up, many of us, as celebrating being part of the Clean Plate Club, right? So whatever's on your plate, you eat that, because failure to do so, well, you're wasting it. And there's always starving kids somewhere that will never get this, so don't be wasting that, right? And so we are cultured to make sure that we clean our plate, but the problem is, a lot of times we put on our plates more, or more is put on our plates than we actually should have. And so he said this: I want you, as you're eating, to actually think and say, as I am eating, am I still hungry? Don't say, am I full? Am I about to get sick? Can I hold another bite? Is my plate clean? Ask yourself, am I still hungry? And if the answer is, no, I'm not hungry, well, then stop. You're not going to get a demerit. Nobody's going to fuss at you. Your mom's not going to come beat your hands with a ruler. Just stop eating before you get to that point. And what I have discovered is that actually makes a difference. And so I'm not eating more, I'm not consuming more than I actually should have. And I'm discovering that I can be and am satisfied with less. Now, here's the question: how does that feel? Well, let me ask you this. How does it feel about 3 o'clock on Thanksgiving afternoon? I mean, you're looking for a bullet. I mean, you are just so miserable. You're so stuffed. Somebody roll me over. I mean, you know what it feels to have just entirely too much. But actually, just being satisfied, it's very satisfying. It feels nice. It is pleasant. You've not gone to an excess, and you don't feel the weight of excess. What I'm saying to you is that with money and with material things, it is the case that when we are pursuing and craving and thinking, I've got to have more, I must get more money, I must accumulate more wealth, I must have the newest phone, I must have the better house, I must have these upgrades, I've got to have this. When we are doing that, it is as if we are trying to capture the wind and we never can. It's as if we're trying to satiate a hunger that can never, ever be satisfied. And craving more leads to more craving, leads to more craving, leads to more craving. So, and how does that feel? Well, it feels lousy. It stinks. And this is what God has called me to. This is what he's called you to experience with respect to money and to material things, satisfaction. Well, what does that look like? It looks like this. If I had more, fine. If I don't, fine. If I had newer, fine. If I don't, fine. If I had bigger, fine. If not, fine. I am okay. And you know how that feels? It feels really good. It feels so satisfying. But when you and I have an affection for things and this insatiable desire to have and to accumulate more, it leads us to an ongoing, unrelenting cycle that we can't stop, and it promotes dissatisfaction. And how does dissatisfaction feel? It stinks. It leads you to obsess. It leads you to have obsessive thoughts. How can I get this? How can I achieve that? What could I do? How could I manage this? How could I... That's lousy. It's like you've got a squirrel running loose in your mind. And I'm telling you that God is saying you don't have to be ensnared by that. I don't have to be ensnared by that. He's helping me. He's helping you by saying, hey, don't have this unhealthy, this out-of-bounds affection for things and for stuff, because if you do, what it's going to do, it's going to make things worse. Having more, chasing more is going to lead you to not be more satisfied, but less satisfied. That's why it's something I ought to avoid, because it promotes dissatisfaction, but it also promotes something else, and that's something that God doesn't want me to have, and that's this thought. It promotes personal reliance. Materialism weighs me down because it promotes personal reliance. On the surface, it sounds kind of like a strange progression of thoughts to say, keep yourself free from the love of money, be satisfied with what you have, and then he says, I will never leave you or abandon you. It's almost like he's talking about prison, marriage, money, abandonment, just incongruous thoughts, things that don't have anything to do with each other. But keep in mind this, you have individuals, some who still have means, many who don't, and he's saying you can experience satisfaction with the little. You can experience satisfaction with the much. That's possible. And then he says, in that same vein, I will never leave you or abandon, which is to say, I will never forsake you. Well, what does that have to do with this? I'd explain it this way. John is our youngest. He's 6, and there are some things that he gets, but there are some things that he doesn't, by virtue of his age, understand. And money is one of those things. And his concept of amounts of money are really kind of strange. And so if you said, John, what's better to have, $1,000 or $1 million? He might say, $3. I mean, he has almost no concept of it. But one thing he does have a concept is this: he has no money. He knows that. I have no money. Now, with respect to me and Caroline, he has no idea what we do or what we don't have. But he's okay with that. Let me give you an example. We went a few weeks ago to see Nathan. He's at Fort Caswell this summer working on staff down at that camp. And so it's at the end of Oak Island, so we've headed down there to stay a couple of days over the weekend with him. And there's no kitchen or anything in those rooms, and so we were going to go out to eat. And whether we went to Taco Bell for lunch or we went to the fish place for dinner, it's interesting. At none of those stops did we get out of the car and John come up to us, to me, or to Caroline, looking kind of sad-faced and say, I'm hungry. I'd like to eat, but I don't have any money. He was carefree and as happy as a lark. He marches right in, he sits right down, and he decides which chicken tenders and french fries he wants from this particular location. Not worried about it at all. Why is he not worried? Because I'm with him. Because Caroline is with him. And so the thought is, if I am with them, I don't have to worry about this. Listen, it is exactly that same thought that the writer of Hebrews is communicating to these believers, many of whom are economically going through some very dire straits. And he's saying to them, I want you to realize that even though some of you have lost your businesses, some of you have lost your property, some of you have had enormous wealth and you've lost that, even though you have had treasured possessions that have been in your family for generations that you've had to sell and you've had to part ways with all of those things, even though that is the case and you're thinking, where is the next meal coming from? I want you to remind yourself this, that the one that you are following has not for a moment abandoned you. The one that you are following, not for a moment, has forsaken you. And why does he want them to remember that? Why does he want them to think that? Because he's wanting them to realize that The one that they're following is the one who made it all, the one that's in control of it all, who ultimately owns it all. And he hasn't abandoned me, which is to say he knows what I'm going through. He hasn't forsaken me, which is to say he hasn't said, hey, just go figure it out. The promise that he is not going to leave or forsake me is an encouragement that I can say, I don't have anything. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm following him. And so long as I've got him, so long as I'm following him, all I can do is to say, I'm going to trust him. I'm going to depend on him because I can't fix this. And so what I can say is this: the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. Now, by contrast, so many times, what is it that we do? We start thinking to ourselves, well, all right, I have X amount. I want to achieve, and let me say this as an aside. This is not a prohibition against saving. This is not a prohibition against having possessions. This is not a prohibition against even possessing large sums of wealth. What's being prohibited is to have an unnecessary affection for that, to be obsessed, to hold those things very tightly, and to not be okay if you were to lose those things, to not be okay and to be completely distraught if those things are no longer yours. That, I believe, is what is being forbidden. But so many times what we do, and so much of it stems from the influence of our culture, is that we're going to think, all right, so I've got X, I want to accomplish Y, and so I want to have this newer device, I want to have this bigger home, I want to have this additional home, I want to have this particular amount of investment income, and so we start thinking those things. And you know what, so many times as we're thinking through that, do you know what is ever present in those thoughts? Me. What can I do? What decision can I make? How can I work so that I can make this happen for me? And what seems to be conspicuously absent in those decisions, in those thought processes? Well, God. What exactly does he want for me? What is it that he's called me to? Where is it that he's called me to? How does he want me to operate in this family? How does he want me to operate in this church? How does he want to operate and use my life in the workplace? We're not asking those questions. And when we are consumed by, and we are weighed down by getting more, by having more, so many times what we are doing is we're putting God out of the equation, we're elevating ourselves so that we're thinking, all right, Michael, how can you make this happen? How can you get this? How can you have that? How can you experience this? And what does that do? It pushes God to the side. And the one that we are to follow, where does he want to be? He wants to be front and center. He wants to be front and center. But instead, so many times what we are doing is we're following culture. A culture that says, get the newest, have the biggest, experience the most, have the most, get more, have more, keep more. And those that are chasing this, what are they experiencing? Well, based not only on this passage, but if you start paying attention to it, they're experiencing two things. They're experiencing increasing amounts of dissatisfaction, lack of contentment, got to have more, and they're thinking all about themselves. Me, depending on me. What can I do? And he's talking to people, many of whom who have nothing. And he says, I want you to remember that the one that you're following has not abandoned you, has not forsaken you. He knows what's going on, and so you can depend not on you and your ability and your financial sense and your investment acuities and all of those things, but rather you can say, the Lord is my helper. And I can be satisfied. I can depend on him. So where does this leave us? What do we do with this? Well, I think out of the gate, first of all, it demands this question. Because everything that we're talking about is contingent on being one of his followers. Do you know that you are? Are you certain that you have that relationship? As we watched this morning as Aiden and Terry were baptized, symbolic of beginning a new relationship in Christ, have you experienced that? And if you haven't, will you please let us help you with that? Would you find me? Would you find Jamie afterwards? If you're watching online, would you reach out to us and let us help you so that you can experience this. But beyond that, this whole idea of materialism, not having a love of money, do you have that? The reality is most would say no. Oh, I don't have that. I mean, I know of people who do, but I don't have that because I don't have enough money, or I do have enough money, or whatever the reason. It's easy for us to say, I don't have that, but don't answer that so quickly. Let me ask you this. If you were to not have anything more, and I don't mean getting something new, ever having any more money, but if you were not to economically rise from where you are, if you were to stay at the same place or even lower, would you be content? Would you be satisfied with what you have? Could you sleep well at night? If God were to guide you to give more generously, would you be willing to say, yes, I will do that? Or would you start scurrying to think, how can I make that up? How can I get more to fill in that loss? Or is it, well, I know the one who guided me to do this is going to take care of me. Let me ask you, would you be willing to say to God today, if I were to lose the wealth that I do have, if I were to lose the possessions that do bear my name, would I still be following? Would I still be following? If the answer is no, let me just tell you, you're being weighed down. You're being weighed down by an unnecessary burden. You're being weighed down by the stuff of life. Will you bow your heads with me?